Hello again, and welcome to War Stories, behind the scenes tales from the front lines of the media. I'm your host, Tom Curley. Welcome to the show. And again, quick overview. Those of us, you who are tuning in for the first time, the show is where me and old dear friends of mine who worked in the media industry. In my case, I was a director and an audio guy for CBS and ABC for about 40 years. We get together and we tell stories of stuff that actually happened in the background, in front of the cameras, and behind the cameras. And of course, I couldn't do it without my co-partner in crime, Mr. Garry Armstrong. Garry, how you doing today?
Um, I am just waking up. I will tell you or tell our viewers that I was trying to race through and look my finest, but I looked at the clock. I had just finished shaving, and I thought, well, I don't have time for a shower. So thank goodness we don't have smell-o-vision. The other thing is,
Smell-o-vision, exactly.
I wanted my makeup people to get at least cover up the wrinkles and everything, but I think they're outside with Duke. I heard him barking, and the makeup people ran outside because I think Duke is auditioning for something, but he won't tell me. He just keeps barking.
It wouldn't. Yes,
Last night,
it wouldn't
last night we
surprise
were
me.
watching something, and Duke got in front of the TV and started barking. I think he was running his lines, and I just told him to get out of the way because we were watching Star Trek Discovery. And Duke kept running in front of the TV, barking up and down and making moves, and then walking over to say, "Well, was that okay? Was that okay?" We finally told him to just get the hell out of the house. But speaking of animals, Tom, I don't know whether
Yeah.
you've worked with animals, but one of the things we had in Boston for many, many years was around Easter time, we had a Catholic priest who was known as the father who blessed the animals. He had this big Hogan's Hero type menagerie of animals, and we usually shot it on tape or shot it on film. The news director that year decided who was going to question him. We were going to do the blessing of the animals live. Somewhere in the back of my head, I could hear W.C. Field saying, "Don't do it. Don't work with children. Don't work with animals." Blah, blah, blah. But they said, "You're doing this," and it was a last minute assignment. They just rushed me out to the North End, I believe. And Father Beatty was there with all of his animals. We had ducks and we had pets of all sizes and shapes, and we had a parrot. I saw the parrot out of the corner of my eye, and I had a suspicion. And you've gone through this, something is going to go wrong. So we started with me introducing uh, the father and his menagerie of animals, and we just cut to him, and he was a pro at doing this. So he went through his whole thing, but the parrot kept circling him. And I said to my cameraman when my mic was turned off for a moment, I said, "I think we're going to have problems with the parrot." And he said, "Don't worry about it, Garry. You're just paranoid." So we went back with me, my mic hot again, and I was told to fill in the gaps of the presentation. So I started doing that. And at one point, I said, "Boy, this is really crazy. Boy, this is really crazy." And then they took me full video, and I started talking, and it's just I was about ready to sign off. Garry Armstrong live, blah 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 blah. So I got up to Garry Armstrong reporting live, and the parrot flew right over me and said, "Boy, this is stupid. Boy, this is stupid. Garry Armstrong, this is stupid." And I said, "Channel 7." And then the parrot said, "Channel 7, Channel 7, Channel 7." Unfortunately, they just cut me off the air. That you can't
They,
work with animals.
you kid. Well, oh, you kid. I'm surprised. They should have left it on that. That's a series right there. Oh my God. Do you know how much you would
Well, I
pay
think
a
I think
trainer?
so many of the people, Tom, like think that you were part of the crew there. They had so many reasons to get back at Garry Armstrong for his behavior and his wacky sense of humor. They figured, let the sucker let him deal with it live on television. So Garry Armstrong, Garry
That's
Armstrong, Garry Armstrong, get the damn bird off the air.
that that is that is ratings gold. I mean, you couldn't train. You know, it,
It-
yeah. if you brought him out on America's Got Talent, and that's when the bird would just sit there and do absolutely nothing. You know, I swear that they
At
that they know these things.
least the bird didn't
That
do
is
a Hitchcock on me and dump on my head. Yeah, I escaped that though.
that's actually, if you think about, I'm Gary Armstrong, Channel 7 News. Plop. Now that would
And
uh,
you probably I
I
would have
would
been heard applause over my IFB. You finally got it.
you yeah you'd get an Emmy. So um, sadly, I think it was last week. Um, we lost Harry Belafonte, and now this is terrible. I
Yes.
probably shouldn't say this, but have you ever, you read that somebody famous died, and your first thought is, "Wow, I didn't know he was still alive." And
Right,
that was I
right.
said, "Oh my God, I didn't know." God bless him. That I because you don't think about this stuff. Um, so you told me that you met Harry Belafonte. Now this I think
I
goes
did.
back to
I
our
did.
Hofstra days at WVHC.
Yeah, and for people who have been following our podcast, I have to tell you, this is just to you folks who have been watching us. Tom produces this, so when I when I thought about doing the Harry Belafonte story, I thought to myself, Gary, you've told this story so many times, but I've been overruled by both my wife Marilyn and the producer and my boss Tom Curley about this story. So I'm going to tell it. If you've heard it before, I'm sorry. Hopefully, it'll be funny this time. This goes
I don't
back
think I've
to
heard it.
when I was still at Hofstra, and we were doing a folk music show called The Myth and the Music. And from time to time, we had live guests. One of the guests was a folk singer named Leon Bibb. And people of our age will say, "Oh, Leon Bibb. He was well liked folk singer." Now we have to edit this down. Long story short, Leon Bibb at some point said, Gary, you've been so kind to me. And I said, Leon, this is WVHC. I don't know how many people are listening, but Gary, trust me, people are listening. I've had feedback from the stuff we've done and the chatter we've had. I want to do a favor for you. And I said, okay. So he says, look, I have to go into the village tonight to meet some people. I'd like you to come along. You'll enjoy it. Have you been to the village gate? And I said, no, only in my dreams. And he said, well, tonight will make your dreams come true. Didn't have a clue of what he was talking about. So fade out, fade in. We're in the village gate. That's back when houses used to flourish with folk singers, when folk music was in the vogue. So we get to the village gate, we walk in, and remember, I'm still a 20 something at this point. And the place you really couldn't see. It was thick with cigarette smoke and fog smoke and smoke from other kinds of things that were being smoked. That's redundant. Anyway, Leon says, Gary, follow me. So I was right on his heels, and he says, my friends are over at the corner. You just walk over that way. And so I followed Leon Bibb, and he said, okay, Gary, there are my friends. And I just stood there for a second, Tom, and I said, holy moly's, but I didn't say that. I, there was Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, James Earl Jones, and Miss Diane Carroll. Well, I stood there, all five, six of me, and I froze. And Bibb sort of shoved me. He says, Gary, go on. Then they're my friends. So I said, okay. And I walked over, and Mr. Sidney Poitier extended his hand, and he said, it's Sidney. I said, yes, you're Sidney Poitier, aren't you? And he said, well, yes, I am. And you're Gary Armstrong, right? I said, I used to be. And he said, no, you still are. So he talked to me for a little bit. I'm going to come back to Sidney Poitier if I remember, because there's a little line in there. Poitier moves over, and Harry Belafonte walks up and says, hi, I'm Harry. And I said, I know. And he starts talking about Leon Bibb a little bit. And then we segued into what kind of music I played. And I told Harry Belafonte I played folk music. I played music from the movies. I played calypso music, of course. And he said, well, what kind of calypso music do you play? And I said, I play Delia's Gone. And he said, that's not calypso. I said, but it has an island flavor. And he said, go on. Tell me, what else did you play? I said, do play, Mr. Belafonte. Call me Harry. Okay. I said, I play Come Back Liza. I play Shenandoah. That's not a calypso. I said, I'm sorry, but I like it. I said, and you do such a fantastic job on Danny Boy. And I have to make sure that I have Alexa play that for us later on today. So he said, well, what else? What else? And I said, well, I also play the song 15. He said, you play that? And I said, well, yes, that's the main music from your film, The World, the Flesh, and the Devil. He said, you saw that movie? I said, yeah, it was terrific. I said, it hasn't gotten much love at the box office, but I thought you were wonderful in that. And you could see his eyes getting brighter and brighter. And he says, but don't you play Deo? And I said, sometimes if I'm in the mood, because my family's from the islands. He said, which islands? And I said, well, St. Thomas and St. Croix and Antigua. I said, Antigua. My dad is from Antigua. My grandpa, my maternal grandpa, is from Barbados, and my mom, who wasn't born in the islands but lived a lot of her life down there, St. Thomas. So he says, well, tell me more, tell me more. So I went on and talked about my family, and then we were talking about Caribbean food, and I mentioned something called fungi, which is a mix of bread and various meats or whatever, and it's served in a soup-like fashion. And he said, oh my God, you know fungi? And I said, yes. So we're jabbering on about the Caribbean food. And then I told him about my most recent visit at that time, still in the 60s. I said I went down there and they wouldn't have any part of me. And he said, well, didn't they know how well you were doing up here? And I said, they didn't want to listen. Well, what did you talk about? I said, well, we talked about the family. And then they kept calling me a mainlander because I didn't spend much time in the islands. He said, well, why did they call you a mainlander? And I said, I just said, because they didn't think I had true island roots. And he said, yeah. And I said, you know, I also found out that while they were carefully introducing me to family members, there had been this preset plot to have me marry one of my island cousins. So I was being shopped as a husband. And that story, Tom, sent Harry Belafonte into giggles, which became tears. And he said, "Oh man, I remember those stories. They did that to me, brother. He said, how did you make out?" And I said, "I got out of the islands as quickly as I could." He said, "Oh my God!" He said, "I've never heard anything like that. That's so terrific." Sydney, come over and listen to this. And Poitier looks at him. That actually glared at him, and he said, "What is it now, Harry?" He said, "Sid, come over here." And Harry said, "This guy has got all these great stories about. He's really an islander." And Sidney said, "Well, that's good." And he looked at me with that pleasant smile, and Harry's tapping him on the shoulder, which meant something was coming up. So Sidney says to me very nicely, "It's really being wonderful listening to your stories, but you know, if you want to succeed in this business, you have to be very true to yourself. Just be yourself. Don't try to be someone else." I said, "Like who?" He said, "Well, don't try to be me or Poitier. I mean, me or Belafonte." And I said, "Well, that's really good advice, and I appreciate it. You know, that's very white of you, Mr. Poitier." And he said, "What?" I said, "That's very white of you." And I'm thinking, oh my God, I think I've done it again. And then he laughed and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Okay, okay." And it was Leon Bibb several days later told me that his famous friends had enjoyed the time they spent with me. And he said, "Sydney really loves your sense of humor." That's it. Sidney Poitier and Harry
That
Belafonte bonding with Garry
wow.
Armstrong.
Wow, that's awesome. I I don't have anything really comparable, but I did uh, go to the Village Vanguard, which was a famous jazz club. Now I'd never been there, and but the one time that I did, I was invited down there by my then roommate. This was in college. In college, there's four of us that lived together, and one of them was a guy named Lou Figs, who was probably one of the most fascinating characters that I have ever met. Lou, you realize he was attending Hofstra University. He was 40 years old, and he was getting a doctorate in philosophy. And
Oh my
now,
goodness.
now, yes, doctorate in philosophy. Now, his job, the way he made a living was he was a counselor for the Nassau County Drug and Alcohol Division. He worked for the county as a counselor, which was ironic because he used to pay his rent with pot. Um, so Lou was a character. When he was 16 or 17 years old, he faked his way into the Navy and actually stole a plane. Well, he took a plane for a joyride. He then became a professional jazz drummer. Oh, and the other thing I didn't mention was Lou was about 6'2", weighed about 300 pounds, had a fifth
Wow.
degree black belt in karate, and didn't have an ounce of fat on him.
Oh my
He
God.
was amazing, and his big claim to fame was he competed in a karate tournament and he kicked the shit out of Elvis Presley. He was always very, very proud of that. So the point is that one day he said, you know, he would always say, you know, I've worked with, you know, pick a famous jazz.
Yeah.
Oh, I worked with him. I worked with him. I
Right.
worked with him. So he invited us down to the Village Vanguard, and sure enough, everybody knew him. I mean, he wasn't lying. And the next thing I knew, I wish I could remember the artist because he was one of my favorites. I'm just sitting next to him on the stage as he's playing the piano. And I'm sitting there going, I'm sitting next to like this incredibly famous jazz musician.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was like, oh, you know, Lou, you're cool. You're cool. Now the other thing that he did, because he did have a sense of humor, he invited us out. We he one of his side jobs was he was a bouncer at a bar, and he invited us out. Well, this bar was on Sunrise Highway, halfway out along, I mean, in the middle of nowhere. Just there's this long road, nothing but, and then all of a sudden there's this bar. All right. And me and my
Right.
my other roommate, Eric, we walk in and we suddenly realize we are the only two white people in this bar. And you could see, you know how all of a sudden
Oh, I know.
everybody's looking at you, even the ones that aren't actually looking at you. And we stop and we
Still
suddenly
looking.
realize
Oh, I know that.
we realize we are in that scene from Animal House, okay, where they go
Yeah.
to a bar and you know the band
yeah.
that played at their toga party is there and they're going hi, you know, and that's when the two guys, can we dance with your dates?
Do you mind if we dance with your dates?
And well, what made it worse was Lou. He saw us coming in, so he hid, and he let us hang out to dry for about 5 minutes, and then he came out. Now, once he came out, and he said, "Oh, these are my roommates." Well, all of a sudden, we could do no wrong. Free drinks, you know. Hey, you're a friend of Lou. So yeah, that was something.
You know,
Oh,
being in a bar and you're the only person of the other color. I certainly have been through that. And one of the things I remember is, well, what do you do? How do you break the that very ominous silence? So you walk up and say, okay, this round's on me. And all of a sudden you become someone's friend. But that
oh yeah,
really was,
that
I
always
can't
works.
imagine.
That always
I,
works.
can you remember how you were feeling in that moment when you were the
Oh
only
yeah.
white guy
Well,
in there?
um, partly terrified, but also partly actually highly amused because you know the place we first went to is, oh my god, this is the scene from Animal House, and then we
Right,
started to
right.
laugh, and we realized, well, that wasn't the smartest thing to do, because these two white kids sit there and what are they laughing at? So yeah, it was a mixture of both. But then, of course, when we realized that, Lou had done that, he'd played the prank. That, hey, you gotta have a sense of humor. It's funny. Elvis
You
Presley
do.
did remind me did remind me of one other story. So there was a brief period of time when the morning news got turned over to the entertainment division, and we did a show from that was starred Mariette Hartley and Rollin Smith, Mark McEwen, and Bob Saget, and it was an entertainment show, but it was the morning show, and we did some seriously cool remotes. So one of the remotes was we went to Graceland, and I got to tell you, it was a surreal experience because we get to the airport and we're on the tram, taking us to our car rental, and everybody on the tram is an Elvis impersonator. I mean, like, and we're going like, what? And they go, and so now we have to. Now I don't know if you've ever been to Graceland, but we had to set up at this show goes on at 7 a.m, so we had to start setting up at 2 a.m. So there we are, 2 a.m, and we're at Graceland, and we set up across the street, and we're moving all of our equipment. But here at 3 a.m, there had to be 30 or 40 people, all Elvis impersonators, standing outside the gate, right? And finally, at one point, because we kept going back and forth, I remember the video guy just stopped in a golf cart, and he's going, "What is wrong with you people? It's 3 a.m. You're not going to get in. It's just not going to happen." And they all just looked at him, and they handed him cards, their name, Elvis impersonator. So I don't. If you've ever been to Graceland, this is very, very cool. Across the street from Graceland is his airplane, which they turned into a gift shop. There's the Heartbreak Hotel. Gift shop or delicatessen. So it was just crazy. So we get set up and we're doing the show, and this show had a live audience. All right. And it was packed. And our musical guest, because we always had a musical guest, especially, since it was Graceland, was Carl Perkins. And I think it was Elvis's backup band. I think they were called the Jordanaires.
Right. Right.
If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
You'll find out.
So they were singing Blue Suede. Yeah, they were singing Blue Suede Shoes, and I was doing the PA mix. So I was outside in the back of the crowd, mixing for the audience. While in the truck, my partner Joe Marcus, he was doing the actual air feed. And when Joe mixes a band, he's fantastic at it. He listens to it loud. So his speakers are cranked up to 11. The whole control room is cranked up to 11. You can't hear anything. Well, a fire broke out in the audience. Now, actually, it turns out it was just a light, a ballast light blew. But when these things blow, it created these billowing clouds of black smoke that started rolling across the audience. And of course, the people in the audience thought, "Oh my God, there's a fire." So I'm trying to get a hold of the control room to tell them that they've got to send out some stations. They got to do something. Call the fire department. There's a fire. Except I'm coming out of a little speaker, "There's a fire out here. There's a fire out here." And all anybody is hearing is, "Step on my blue suede shoes," So finally I just gave up. And fortunately, it wasn't a crisis. Oh my God, we had another one. We had a woman had a heart attack in the audience while we were live on the air. And again, I was doing the PA feed, and we're going like, this lady had a heart attack. Well, and they just kept doing the show. The EMTs came in with a stretcher. So I mean, you're watching the show, but if you could see the audience, nobody's watching the show. They're all watching this drama. Right. And I remember I said, guys, guys, there's somebody's having a heart attack out here. You got to call the medics. And one of the producers said, he said, "Oh, don't worry, we're sending out Dr. Bob Arnott." Now, Dr. Bob Arnott, great guy, really nice guy. He was our TV doctor, but he was a sports physiologist, right? And they go, "We're sending out Dr. Bob," and I said, "What's he going to do? Give her exercises to improve her back?" But anyway, they got the lady out. She survived. Everything was fine. And the
That
beauty
is
of it
bizarre.
was you never knew that it happened. So we have a new tradition on this show where we keep promoing that we're going to do something, and then
Right.
I can't believe it. We did it. All right. I don't know if you notice, if you watch this show a lot, it took us 3 episodes to finally get to your story about Sybil Shepherd. And we're now on episode number 3, where you have a great story about Yul Brynner, which we are not going to get to because we have run out of time.
I promise you, whenever we do, you'll like it.
Yeah, we promise. It's a great story. I'm going to do my Joe Franklin. It's a great story, best story. I've never heard it before, but trust me, it's great. All right, I'm going to throw this in really, really, really fast because otherwise I will forget. Hofstra, back when we were in Hofstra, they created the communications department. You were probably one of the earliest members. They had one professor, a guy named Frank Easy, and by the time I got there, they had 2 professors. And they had one little studio. It really wasn't a studio. It was just a large room. They had 3 old cameras. I mean, the old black and white Plumicon from the 50s with the 3 lenses that, you'd have to rack the lenses to change the. So there was this advanced directing class. And this guy, he wanted to do this incredibly complex show, and part of the script, there was supposed to be a fire, and he wanted to figure out how to simulate a fire. Well, the general manager of the radio station WVHC, our old and dearest friend Jeff Krause, said, "Well, here's what you do: you get yourself a baking tin, and you take some steel wool, and you pour a little bit of gasoline on it, sprinkle some gasoline on it, okay, light the steel wool, and then hold it in front of the camera, and you'll see the flames, and it'll be a great effect." So, well, he did. Now, the only thing he didn't seem to get, this kid, was sprinkle a little bit of gasoline. He poured a ton of gasoline over the steel wool, lit it, and almost set the roof on fire, because we're all sitting there, and all of a sudden, we all look around, and then the room is filling up with black smoke and black smoke and black smoke, and and somebody's going to call the fire department. Oh my God, it was classic stuff. We have a lot of fun.
Incredible.
So anyway, here we go. Time for the inevitable plugs. Let's start with, of course, Marilyn's blog, your lovely wife that we all contribute to, Serendipity, Seeking Intelligent Life on Earth. And of course, the sister podcast, Get Off My Lawn, with myself, where we talk about life, the universe, and basically whatever pops into my head. And of course, Voicescapes Audio Theater for the best in audio theater and drama. Great deal of fun. Oh, and also there is a show that I did a long, long time ago that is back, called A Half Hour Radio Show. It's hysterically funny for about a half hour. You can check that out. So anyway, that seems to be that. And I don't know what to tell you except toodaloo.
I don't know.